Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire. Epictetus spent most of his life as a slave. Two men, opposite circumstances, identical philosophy. One had all the power in the world. The other had none. Yet both arrived at the same brutal truth. Here's what nobody tells you. Your circumstances don't create your character. They reveal it. Robert was 34 years old when his wife told him she wanted a divorce. He wasn't surprised. He'd seen it coming for months, maybe years. What surprised him was his own reaction. Instead of sadness or anger, he felt relief. Not because the marriage was over, but because he finally had someone to blame for how empty his life had become. His career stalled at middle management. His body soft from years of takeout and Netflix. His friendships reduced to occasional likes on social media. And now, his marriage over, the perfect excuse. He told everyone who would listen about what she did, what she said, how she destroyed everything. His mother agreed. His friends nodded sympathetically. His therapist validated his pain. Everyone confirmed what he already believed. He was the victim. She was the villain. And that story kept him warm at night like a familiar blanket. But there's something that almost nobody understands about the victim mentality. It's not a weakness, it's a strategy. A brilliant, seductive, soul-destroying strategy that your brain uses to protect you from the most terrifying truth you'll ever face. That you are responsible, not for what happened to you, but for what you do next. Robert's father had been a victim too. 32 years at the same factory. Complaining every single day about the boss who didn't appreciate him. The system that kept him down. The opportunities he never got because he didn't go to college. He died at 61, 3 years into retirement, bitter and forgotten. Robert had promised himself he'd be different. He wasn't. He'd just changed the details of the story while keeping the same structure. Circumstances happen, I suffer, nothing changes, repeat. There's a Roman Stoic principle that destroys this entire pattern. Not gradually, not gently, but with the force of a hammer hitting glass. And Robert discovered it in the most unexpected place. Not in therapy, not in a book, but in a conversation with a 19-year-old kid at the gym. Robert had joined the gym as part of his post-divorce self-improvement phase. The same phase that included the haircut, the new cologne, the dating apps. He'd been going for 6 weeks, usually late at night when the place was nearly empty. That's where he met Daniel. The kid worked the closing shift at the front desk, studying between members, checking in. Philosophy major. Robert had mentioned his divorce once while signing in, not expecting much more than polite acknowledgement. Instead, Daniel said something that lodged in his brain like a splinter. So, what are you going to do with all that freedom? Freedom. Robert had been calling it abandonment, rejection, failure. This 19-year-old kid called it freedom. The comment annoyed him. What did this kid know about real life? About real loss? But it stuck. 2 weeks later, Robert was back at the gym, later than usual. Daniel was reading at the desk. Robert noticed the book. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Is that any good? He asked, mostly to make conversation. Daniel looked up, smiled. It's brutal. Makes you confront everything you've been lying to yourself about. Robert laughed. Sounds depressing. Nah, it's liberating. Once you stop lying, you stop suffering. Daniel held up the book. This guy ruled the entire Roman Empire. Could have blamed everyone for everything. Had actual enemies trying to kill him. Plagues destroying his cities. Betrayal from people he trusted. And his philosophy was basically, nobody can hurt me without my permission. That phrase, nobody can hurt me without my permission. It sounded like toxic positivity, like something on a motivational Instagram post. Robert almost dismissed it immediately. But something about hearing it from a college kid reading philosophy at 11 p.m. at a gym stopped him. That's easy to say when you're reading old books. Harder when you're actually going through it. Daniel nodded. Yeah, that's what everyone says. But Epictetus, another Stoic, he was an actual slave, literally owned by another person, and he said the same thing. You always have control over one thing, your response. Robert wanted to argue, to list all the things that had been done to him, all the ways he'd been wronged. But Daniel wasn't lecturing. He was just reading his book, occasionally looking up when someone walked by. There was no judgment in his eyes, just clarity. "So if I'm understanding this right," Robert said, "according to these guys, nothing that happened to me matters? I should just suck it up?" "No," Daniel said, closing the book but keeping his finger in the page. "What happened absolutely matters. But what matters more is what you do with it. See, the victim mentality is comfortable. You get sympathy. You get to avoid responsibility. You get to stay exactly where you are. But the cost is your power. Every time you say this happened to me, you're saying, I have no control. And once you believe that, you're done." Robert drove home that night in silence. No podcast, no music, just the hum of the highway and the uncomfortable feeling of someone pointing at something you've been carefully avoiding looking at. The next day he went back to the gym, not to work out, to ask Daniel a question. "Okay, so how? How do you stop being a victim if that's all you've been?" Daniel grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down 5 titles. "These are the 5 Stoic lessons that destroy the victim mentality. I learned them over 2 years. You can learn them faster if you're ready. But you have to actually practice them, not just understand them." Robert took the paper. 5 short phrases. They looked simple. Almost too simple. But Daniel's eyes were serious. "These will make you uncomfortable. That's how you know they're working." The first lesson was written at the top. "You chose this." Robert stared at the words. "I chose this? I didn't choose to get divorced. You chose to stay in a marriage you knew was failing," Daniel said quietly. "You chose to ignore the problems. You chose not to work on yourself. You chose comfort over growth. Maybe she initiated the divorce, but you built the circumstances that made it inevitable." The words landed like punches. Robert's first instinct was anger. Who was this kid to judge him? But underneath the anger was something sharper. Recognition. The uncomfortable, undeniable truth that every major disappointment in his life had been preceded by months or years of choices that led directly to that outcome. The Stoics believe that most of our suffering comes from trying to control what we can't control, while ignoring what we can. Daniel continued, "You can't control what she did, but you could have controlled what you did. And you can control what you do now. That's the first lesson. You chose this, and that means you can choose something different." Robert went home and made a list, not of what had been done to him, but of every choice he'd made that led to where he was. The times he chose silence over honesty. The times he chose comfort over effort. The times he chose resentment over communication. The list was 3 pages long, and for the first time in months, he didn't feel like a victim. He felt like someone who had made mistakes, and mistakes can be corrected. The second lesson was harder. Your pain is not special. When Daniel explained this one, Robert almost walked away. "I'm not saying your pain doesn't matter," Daniel clarified. "I'm saying it's not unique. Millions of people have been divorced. Millions have felt betrayed. Millions have lost years to regret. Your pain is real, but it's not special. And the moment you stop treating it like it's special, you stop using it as an excuse." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." Not because loss doesn't hurt, but because everyone experiences it. The emperor and the slave, the rich and the poor. Everyone loses something. The question is not whether you'll experience pain. The question is whether you'll use that pain as a reason to stop, or as fuel to move forward. Robert started noticing how often he told his divorce story. To coworkers at lunch, to his barber, to strangers at bars. He'd refined it over months, calibrated the details for maximum sympathy, and every time he told it, he felt a little rush. The validation, the nods, the thee. That's terrible, man. He was getting something from the story, and that something was keeping him stuck. So he stopped telling it. When people asked why he was single, he just said, "Going through a divorce, but I'm focused on rebuilding." No details, no villain, no performance. The first few times felt strange, like he was leaving something unsaid. But then, something shifted. Without the story to maintain, without the sympathy to collect, he had to actually deal with the reality. And the reality was this: he had work to do. The third lesson appeared on week 3. Suffering is optional. Daniel explained it like this: pain is what happens to you. Suffering is what you do with the pain. You got divorced. That's painful. But replaying every argument in your head for months, imagining what you should have said, blaming yourself or her in endless loops, that's suffering. And that's a choice. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it, that matters there." The Stoics distinguished between the initial pain of an event and the ongoing suffering we create by ruminating on it. The event is external. The suffering is internal. And internal things are always within our control. Robert realized he'd been cultivating his suffering like a garden, watering it with repetitive thoughts, feeding it with worst-case scenarios, protecting it from any perspective that might diminish it. Because somewhere deep down, the suffering felt like loyalty. If he stopped suffering, it would mean the marriage didn't matter, that she didn't matter. But that wasn't true. He could honor what was without torturing himself over what wasn't. He started a new practice. Every time he noticed himself spiraling into a thought loop about the past, he'd say out loud, "That's suffering. I'm choosing this." Sometimes just naming it was enough to break the pattern. Other times, he had to actively redirect his mind to something he could actually control. A project at work, a workout, a conversation with a friend. Slowly, the loops got shorter. The suffering became optional. And increasingly, he opted out. The fourth lesson was the one that changed everything. Your response is your responsibility. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This doesn't mean pretending bad things aren't bad. It means recognizing that between what happens and how you feel is a space. And in that space is your power to choose. Robert had spent months believing that his ex-wife's actions controlled his emotional state. When she was cold in a text, he was angry for days. When she was cooperative about logistics, he felt temporary relief. He'd given her complete control over his inner world. And she didn't even know it. Daniel introduced him to a practice called the pause. Between stimulus and response, insert a pause. Something happens. You feel the immediate reaction. But before you act on it, you pause. You ask yourself, is this response going to move me toward the person I want to become, or keep me as the person I have been? Robert started applying it everywhere. Email from his ex. Pause. Feel the anger. Choose the response. Criticism from his boss. Pause. Feel the defensiveness. Choose the response. Setback at the gym. Pause. Within a month, people started noticing something different about him. He was calmer, more deliberate, less reactive. His boss even asked if he was okay, because the guy who used to get defensive at every meeting was now just nodding, taking notes, and implementing changes without drama. Robert realized something profound. Most of his professional stagnation hadn't been about competence. It had been about his inability to receive feedback without treating it as an attack. His victim mentality hadn't just affected his personal life. It had infected everything. The fifth and final lesson was the one that completed the transformation. You are what you do, not what you intend. The Stoics were ruthlessly practical. They didn't care about your thoughts, your feelings, or your intentions. They cared about your actions. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." Robert had spent years intending to be better, intending to work out, intending to advance his career, intending to be a better husband. But intention without action is just fantasy. And fantasy is another form of the victim mentality. I would have been successful, but life got in the way. I would have been happy, but she ruined it. Every would have is an admission that you're not doing. Daniel gave him one final challenge. For the next 30 days, I want you to stop talking about what you're going to do. Just do things. And at the end of each day, write down only what you actually did, not what you thought about doing, not what you planned to do, what you did. The first day, Robert's list was embarrassingly short. Went to work, went to gym, made dinner, watched 2 episodes of a show. That was it. No grand transformation, no heroic effort. Just the mundane reality of what he actually did. But he kept going, and slowly, the list changed. Went to work, had difficult conversation with boss about taking on more responsibility. Went to gym, helped new member learn proper form, made dinner, called dad, first real conversation in months. Read for 30 minutes, actions compounded. Small daily choices that nobody else noticed started reshaping his reality. The guy who used to complain about not having time to read was now reading 30 minutes every night. The guy who used to say he'd start working out consistently was now on a 90-day streak. The guy who blamed his ex for his unhappiness was now building a life that had nothing to do with her. 6 months after that first conversation at the gym, Robert got promoted. Not because of his technical skills, which hadn't changed much, but because his manager noticed he'd stopped making excuses and started making solutions. He'd stopped needing to be right and started needing to be effective. The victim had become a builder. Around the same time, he ran into his ex-wife at a coffee shop. She was with someone new. Robert felt the old familiar tightness in his chest, the beginning of the story he used to tell himself. But then he paused. He recognized the pattern. And he chose differently. He walked over, said hello politely, and genuinely wished her well. She seemed surprised, maybe even a little disappointed that he wasn't bitter. Later, Robert realized why. His bitterness had validated her decision to leave. His transformation called it into question. But that wasn't his concern anymore. He wasn't performing for her approval or her regret. He was building a life that had nothing to do with her. Daniel graduated and moved to another city for grad school. Before he left, Robert took him out for dinner. I never properly thanked you, Robert said. You changed my life. Daniel smiled. I didn't change anything. You did. I just pointed at what you were avoiding looking at. Still, Robert insisted, most people wouldn't have bothered with a divorced guy feeling sorry for himself. You know what Marcus Aurelius said? Daniel replied. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But the first have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. So none of them can hurt me. Daniel paused. You weren't meddling or surly. You were just stuck, and the first have been stuck before. Someone help me. 2 years later, Robert teaches a weekly class at a community center. Not philosophy, exactly. More like practical stoicism for regular people going through divorce, job loss, health crises. The kind of brutal life events that tempt you to become a victim. Last week, a woman in her 40s sat in the back, arms crossed, skeptical. She reminded him of himself. At the end, she raised her hand. This all sounds nice, but you don't understand my situation. My ex-husband destroyed my credit, turned the kids against me, and now I'm starting over at 42 with nothing. Robert nodded. You're right. I don't understand your specific situation. But the first understand the mentality, and the first can tell you this. As long as you're focused on what he did, you're still giving him power over what you do next. The Stoics would ask you, which do you want more? To be right about how you were wronged, or to be free? She sat with that for a moment, then quietly asked, how do I start? Robert wrote down the same 5 lessons Daniel had given him. These will make you uncomfortable. That's how you know they're working. You chose this. Your pain is not special. Suffering is optional. Your response is your responsibility. You are what you do, not what you intend. 5 brutal lessons that destroy the victim mentality, not by denying what happened to you, but by refusing to let what happened define what happens next. The Stoics understood something most people never learn. Life will hurt you. People will betray you. Circumstances will disappoint you. That's not optional. But becoming a victim, staying a victim, building an identity around being a victim, that's a choice. And every day you wake up, you get to choose again. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and lost children to plague. Epictetus lived in chains. Both men faced suffering that would justify a lifetime of bitterness. Both chose something different. They chose to focus on the only thing they could control, their response. You have the same choice. You've always had it. The question is not whether life has hurt you. The question is what you're going to do with the hurt. Now let me ask you something. You've made it this far in the video. That means something about this message resonated. Maybe you recognized yourself in Robert's story. Maybe you're tired of your own victim narrative. Maybe you're ready to choose something different. Here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, practice just one of these lessons. Pick the one that makes you most uncomfortable. That's probably the one you need most. And at the end of each day, write down one action you took that proved you're choosing differently. Not what you thought about, not what you planned, what you did, because the Stoics were ruthlessly practical. They knew that philosophy is worthless unless it changes how you act. And your actions are the only true measure of who you're becoming. Comment below which lesson you're choosing to practice this week. When you write it publicly, you transform intention into commitment. You stop being someone who thinks about changing and become someone who's changing. The victim mentality is seductive. It's comfortable. It requires nothing from you, but it costs everything from you. Your power, your growth, your future. The Stoics offered a different path, not easier, but infinitely more free. The question is simple. Which do you want more? The comfort of the victim story, or the freedom of taking responsibility? Choose wisely, because you are choosing either way.